Hi guys, it's Craig. Hope you watched my previous video where I spoke largely about Sasol, what I think is going to happen with the diesel and oil price, with inflation, why I think the Fed isn't going to pivot. If you haven't watched it, please watch it now. This particular video is about banking stocks, but specifically I'd like to take us back a little bit about the times that banks have failed in South Africa, maybe a little bit of a discussion around Saambou, African Bank, unsecured lending, and why I think not all banking stocks are extremely important to keep in mind when it comes to advancing credit. Let's go back maybe also 7 or 8 years ago to Capitec. Let's go back to roundabout African Bank's time, 2014. That particular stage, Capitec was still granting very small microloans. They were granting 5,000 Rand a year, 10,000 Rand, 12,000 Rand. And if people paid well, they might be able to apply for a second loan of 12 or 15,000 Rand and so on. There's a history behind why microloans started at under 10, 12,000, and it's to do with in terms of interest rate differentials and what you could charge on smaller loans and higher loans. And then eventually Capitec started to grant higher amounts, originally 50,000, then 125,000, 125 became 250,000, and now they grant 500,000 Rand access facilities. What an access facility simply means is people can put money in the account and draw that money out again. There's no fixed terms of repayment. So because the quantum, the value of the loan has got much higher to an individual, the terms of repayment are not easy to track. So if somebody puts money in and takes money out within 24 or 48 hours, that might need to be a red flag. But in Capitec's case, it's not considered a red flag. However, if it was a term loan and somebody could not make the repayment, they would immediately be flagged as a potential default. So that's the one issue that I have with the difference between Capitec and the other banks, is the nature of the lending, the ability to track whether a consumer is under pressure, and then secondly, the fact that they take on all of the risk plus. So in addition to the individual defaulting on their loan, Capitec is self-insuring. So they may well get their loan repayment back if they decide, okay, we're going to pay a claim because this person was retrenched or this person qualifies for disability. They get their loan amount back, but essentially that capital has still come out of the group. It's now come out of the pool from the life insurance side. In my opinion, Capitec is transforming very much into a life insurance business. It's selling funeral plans. It's losing a little bit of focus from traditional banking. I would have preferred and been more bullish about Capitec if instead of them outsourcing their home loans to SA Home Loans, I would have been more secure if they actually did what they promised to do 7 or 8 years ago, and that was to start a vehicle asset finance business, to start a mortgage loan business. But my personal opinion is that the credit department is not geared up for sufficient credit checking in terms of valuation of properties, assessing of vehicles before granting secured lending. Capitec very much are geared up for unsecured lending and selling of simple products like funeral plans. So what happened when Saambou ran into trouble? Johan Marburg and the executive came out and said, look, nothing to worry about, we can handle this. And to be quite fair, Saambou had a very big mortgage loan book, and they had a good mortgage loan book, and so theoretically they probably could have survived if there wasn't also a run on depositors. So Saambou lost a substantial portion of their deposit book in February 2002. There was a big run on it, and eventually that run on deposits there also affected a lot of the other small banks, the most notable being BOE at the time, and we had these banks failing during that period of time. In 2008, because there were not many new bank licenses issued, we didn't see much of a crisis in South Africa's banking industry. But of course, African Bank bought 1.25 billion rands worth of Saambou's unsecured lending book when they went under, and it took a while for African Bank to, I suppose, reach a situation where they just couldn't get out of the struggle. Part of their big downfall was also purchasing Ellerines, and the cost that it came in terms of running Ellerines as a furniture store. But Leon Kirkinis, the CEO at the time, and the entire executive at African Bank also said, no problem, we're going to survive that. They were repeating the same story, that there's nothing to be concerned about. Weeks before African Bank went under curatorship, Johan Marburg, executive, were repeating the same thing. And so one should be very cautious of listening to the executive of a bank telling you that everything is okay. Invariably, executives have shares in the company. They don't want those shares to drop. They have bonus structures in place that are sometimes reliant on share appreciation rights, on making sure that they are never accused of malfeasance or lending money without proper risk controls. The normal default position of executive will be not to create any panic. They don't want to run on depositors. They don't want people to be concerned, because it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy when people start pulling money out of a bank, that invariably these guys are going to go under. So keep that in mind. There are certainly opportunities. What I find extremely strange is that Capitec is the riskiest of those top 5 banks, and yet it's sitting on a price earnings multiple of 3 times higher than any of the other banks, ABSA, Nedbank particularly, and it's sitting on up to 6 times price to book compared to other banks, and most banks should be sitting at a small discount to price to book in the current environment. So from that point of view, I have always had a strategy of long Nedbank, long ABSA, and short Capitec. Unfortunately, when Capitec runs, it tends to have a sustained period of an upward trajectory, and when it falls, it tends to fall quite quickly and quite heavily. So don't forget, when Capitec results came out, the share price went from 1,800 to 1,500 in a matter of 2 or 3 days. And the current momentum that you're seeing in the share price, where we're seeing sometimes 3% on a day, whereas other banks are only up 0.5%, says something. It's not sustainable. It's up to you whether you want to play the momentum, or like me, you're more interested in fundamentals and how earnings will ultimately drive the share price. Unfortunately, I can't tell you whether the share price will fall this week, this month, or this year, but it's certainly something to keep in mind, and this won't be the last video that I put out on Capitec, so please subscribe to the channel if it's something that's on your radar. During the next video, I want to chat about another favorite share, and That's a company called Renogen.